Please don't lift my dress, Amara whispered, her voice trembling so faintly it almost vanished beneath the patter of rain against the skylight. Malik Carter froze in the doorway of the marble bathroom, steam from the shower curling around his feet like slow-moving ghosts. At first, he thought she'd fainted when the sharp crash of bone meeting porcelain reached him. When he saw her crumpled on the floor, hair plastered to her cheek and blood streaking the pale tiles, he didn't think he just ran. She was curled in on herself, gripping the hem of her uniform dress with both hands, knuckles white. Her leg was bleeding, deep red, soaking through the dark grey fabric pulled at her hip. Yet she was still holding that dress down like her life depended on it. Malik knelt beside her. Amara, you're bleeding. I said don't touch it. Her voice cracked, not with anger but with fear, something raw and old. Malik's instinct as a businessman was to take control. But this wasn't a boardroom, this was blood, fear, and something he didn't understand. You need help. I have to see how bad it is. No, she whispered, her glassy eyes locking onto his with desperation. You don't understand, please. She didn't look afraid of pain. She looked afraid of being seen. The bleeding wasn't stopping. I won't look. I just need to stop the bleeding. Before she could stop him, Malik gently pulled the fabric away from her thigh. It wasn't just a wound. It was a scar, a tattoo, faded, torn, and burned. The skin was nulled, as if someone had tried to erase something branded into her body. The surrounding flesh was uneven, scarred in streaks that told a story of fire and acid. And faintly beneath the damage, he could still make out a barcode, numbers half missing, and two words that struck him cold. Null property, not for resale. The words were broken, melted into her skin, but still clear enough to understand. It looked less like a tattoo, and more like an expiration label on a human being. Malik's hands drew back. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to say. Amara turned her head away slowly, as if her body no longer trusted itself. You weren't supposed to see that, she said hollowly. I'm sorry. Sorry for what? That I made you see it. That I let myself fall. That I let my dress ride up. She closed her eyes. I should have been more careful. Malik wanted to scream at someone, the world, whoever had done this to her. Whatever system made someone feel shame for surviving. He moved back, letting her pull the fabric over the mark again. The bleeding had slowed, but the real damage wasn't physical. I'll get the first aid kit, he said quietly. You won't be alone. She didn't answer. When he returned, he knelt again, keeping more distance this time, giving her space. She finally loosened her grip on the dress enough for him to work, though she never opened her eyes. He pressed gauze, cleaned the wound, and avoided the scar, not because he was afraid to see it again, but because he knew she didn't want him to. The air between them was heavy, not with steam now, but with questions. Who had done this to her? Why did she have that mark? How had she ended up here in his house, folding towels and humming under her breath as if nothing had ever happened? He wanted to ask, but more than that, he wanted her to choose to tell him. When the bandage was done, he stood. You need to rest, she nodded faintly, still avoiding his eyes. Thank you. After a long moment, Malik said softly, when you're ready to tell me what that means, I'll listen. Then he left the room, leaving the door open. That night, Malik sat alone in his office, city lights flickering beyond the wide windows. He had built companies, negotiated with billionaires, argued with senators, but never had he felt as small and unsure as he had on that bathroom floor. Amara Johnson was not just his maid, and whatever that mark on her leg meant, whoever had done that to her was still out there, breathing and walking free. Malik didn't know the whole truth yet, but he knew this much: he couldn't pretend he hadn't seen it, and he could no longer pretend she was just another employee. Not anymore. The next morning, Malik noticed the house was quieter than usual. There was no gentle clatter of dishes in the kitchen, no faint hum of music that Amara sometimes played while she worked. He stepped into the kitchen half expecting to see her at the counter making tea or folding towels with that quiet focus she always carried. But the space was empty, and the tea kettle was cold. Upstairs, He knocked gently on her door. There was no answer. He didn't push. Instead, he left a small tray outside: green tea, dry toast, and a handwritten note that simply said, "Take your time, I'm here." For the next 3 days, they moved like shadows in the same house. Amara didn't leave her room except late. At night, when the faint sound of her footsteps crossed the hallway like a ghost, Malik gave her space, but his mind kept circling back to that mark: null property, not for resale. It wasn't just cruelty. It felt systemic. It suggested a process, not a one-time act. One night, Malik opened his laptop and began searching. Hours passed as he went deeper. Survivor testimonies, NGO reports, obscure deep web articles. Then he found it, a reference to something called Project Null, an alleged internal classification system used by unregulated trafficking networks to mark individuals deemed unsellable due to defiance, age, or damage. Those branded were either discarded or passed into black market circuits for torture, debt labor, or worse. It wasn't a rumor, it was real. And someone had done that to Amara. On the 4th morning, Malik found her in the back garden. She was barefoot, crouched beside a planter, brushing soil around the base of a half-dead lavender bush. She didn't look up when he stepped outside. "I thought you left," she said quietly. "I would never do that." Her fingers trembled slightly, but she kept working. Malik stood there for a moment before speaking. "I've been reading about the barcode, about what null status means." Amara closed her eyes. "Of course you did. I'm sorry." "No. Don't say that. You have nothing to be sorry for." She looked up at him now, her gaze steady. "I just didn't want you to know what kind of body I'm living in." Malik stepped closer, slow and careful. "Your body isn't the shame here. The people who did that to you are—" She let out a sharp breath. "That sounds good, easy to say when you weren't the one begging in the back of a van with your hands zip-tied. You're right, I wasn't, but I'm standing here now." She stood, brushing dirt from her palms, her expression tightening. Why are you still here? You saw what I am. That mark, that's not just trauma, Malik, that's inventory." "You think that's all I saw?" "I saw a woman who still protected her dignity while she was bleeding on the floor. I saw someone who begged, not because she was ashamed, but because she still believed she had the right to boundaries. That's more strength than I've ever seen in any boardroom." Amara's lips parted as if to reply, but she said nothing. Instead, she looked away. "You don't have to say things to make me feel human. I'm not completely. I've spent more time being a number than a name." Malik took a slow breath. "Then let me start by calling you by your name, Amara." Her eyes flicked back to his, and for a moment there was nothing but quiet recognition between them. That evening, Malik placed a small sketchbook and a box of pencils on the kitchen table without a note or explanation. The next morning, the sketchbook was gone. Days passed, and the rhythm of the house began to return in small ways. The clatter of dishes came back, the scent of herbal tea drifted from the kitchen, and the faint hum of music filled the hallways again. Malik didn't push. He let her move at her own pace. One night, as he walked past the sunroom, he saw her sitting cross-legged on the floor, head bent over the sketchbook he had left. Her hand moved quickly across the page, the pencil racing like it was trying to outrun her thoughts. Leaning against the doorframe, he said quietly, "What are you drawing?" She didn't look up. "A face. Yours." "Why?" "Because I need to know if you're real." Malik swallowed the lump in his throat. "That's fair." She paused, pencil hovering just above the paper. "You're not trying to fix me, are you?" "No. I don't think you're broken. I just think you deserve more than silence." Amara stared at him for a long moment before going back to her drawing. "Me too," she said softly. That night, Malik sat in his study, staring out at the rain. Something had shifted, not healed, not fixed, but shifted. It felt like a door cracking open where a wall had been. He knew that whatever came next wouldn't be simple, but it might be worth everything. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the wide kitchen windows, casting gold across the hardwood floor. Amara stood at the counter, chopping vegetables with slow, methodical precision. Her movements were quiet and deliberate, almost meditative. Malik watched from the dining room, not interrupting. Something in her posture had changed, but that she was still guarded, but no longer shrinking herself to fit the space. After breakfast, Malik found a folded piece of paper on his desk. It was a pencil sketch of his face, softened by light, the outline of a window reflected in his glasses. At the bottom, written in delicate cursive, were 4 words: "Thank you." For staying, he didn't say anything to her about it. But when they crossed paths in the hallway later, she gave him a small nod. That was enough. Over the next few days, more sketches began to appear around the house. A sparrow perched on the garden fence. The way light hit the kitchen sink at sunset. His dog curled up at the foot of the stairs. None of them were signed. But they didn't need to be. Malik started leaving small things in return: a new set of watercolors on the bookshelf, a tin of chamomile tea by her favorite mug, a photo of the Savannah coastline tucked into her sketchbook. No questions, no explanations, just quiet gestures. Amara accepted them with the same understated grace she used when she cleaned the rooms. The rhythm between them began to rebuild, but it wasn't the same one they had before. It was slower, deeper, built on something unspoken. One evening, Malik returned from a late meeting and found her in the sunroom, painting with her sleeves rolled up, hair tied back with a ribbon he recognized as one of his mother's old silk ties. The canvas showed a woman in a red dress standing on the edge of a cliff, her hair whipping wildly around her face. The sea below was violent, but she looked unafraid. "Is that her?" Malik asked quietly. "It's who I wanted to be," she replied without looking up. "I think she's already here." This time she turned toward him, her eyes clear but her voice trembling slightly. "What do you see when you look at me?" Malik thought for a moment. "I see someone who should never have had to survive what she did, but did anyway. I see someone who refuses to let herself be erased, even when the world tried to reduce her to scars and ink. I see someone brave enough to start again. You're the first man I've met who didn't look at me like I was broken or dangerous," she said. "I've been broken too," he answered. "Just not in the same way." Something softened in her expression. "I know. That's why I trust you." The next afternoon, Malik sat in his office, scrolling through an endless trail of documents, news archives, and court records. The name kept appearing again and again: Sheriff Marcus Reed, once a Border Patrol officer in Louisiana, now the mayor of a small Georgia town with ambitions to run for Congress. On the surface, his record was flawless. Community outreach programs, speeches about law and order, a spotless public image, but buried in a sealed civil case from 8 years earlier was a deposition naming him in the loss of custody of a minor undocumented female. No charges were filed. The case was dismissed. The girl's name wasn't listed, but Malik didn't need it. Amara had mentioned Louisiana before. This was no coincidence. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. The man who had allowed that system to mark her like property was not only free, he was gaining power. Malik picked up his phone and called Nadine Brooks, a federal investigator he knew from his college days, now working on human trafficking cases. She answered on the second ring. After a quick exchange, he sent over everything he had found. Her reply was short. "Don't get too deep, he has federal friends. Be careful who's watching." Malik stared out the window at the city lights. He didn't care who was watching, not anymore. The next morning he found Amara sitting on the back patio, barefoot, her toes digging into the wood as if she needed the contact with the earth. She looked up when she saw him, her gaze questioning. Malik sat beside her and handed her a folder. "I found him," he said. Her fingers tightened around her pencil. "Him, the man who ran the facility. The one who let it happen. His name is Marcus Reed. He's a mayor now, running for Congress. It's all in there." She didn't open the folder. Instead, she stared out over the yard, her voice low and steady. "You'll know what it's like to scream for help in a place where screaming means nothing." Malik stayed silent. "I begged," she continued. "I bled, and when I was finally let out, I didn't want justice. I just wanted to disappear. You have every right to stay gone if that's what you want, Malik said quietly. But, if this man is still doing to others what he did to you, you deserve to decide whether he gets to keep hiding behind clean suits and polished speeches. She looked down at the folder, then back up at him. I want to burn him down. Malik met her gaze without hesitation. Then we start with the truth. That night, the two of them sat in the living room with documents spread across the coffee table, photos, sworn statements. Malik had traced Reed's connections to at least 3 now-defunct detention centers and a shell company linked to private transport services for detainees. Everything pointed to a coordinated cover-up of abuse and illegal transfers. Voice was flat. No one will believe this. They'll believe you. I'm no one. You're the woman who lived. She stared into the flames in the fireplace. If I speak up, they'll dig into me. They'll find I don't have legal entry. They'll see my identity is stitched together with fake names and borrowed air. You'll have me, Malik said. We can go public, or we can go anonymous. But this time you decide what happens to your story. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she watched the fire until her eyes reflected the glow. Then let's stop whispering. I'm tired of being silent in a world that was happy to pretend I didn't exist. Malik nodded once. And I'm tired of watching men like him win. They stayed there until the fire burned low. The silence between them charged, no longer empty but full of intent. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about fighting back. The first threat came 2 days later. Amara found it taped to the front gate, a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photo, grainy but unmistakable. She was maybe 16, sitting on a cot, head down, wrists bruised, the barcode on her thigh fresh and angry. Across the bottom, scrawled in red ink, were the words, "Stay quiet or stay buried." She didn't scream, she didn't run. She walked straight into Malik's office, placed the photo on his desk, and said calmly, "They know." Malik studied the image. It wasn't public. Someone had kept records. Someone close to Marcus Reed. He reached for his phone to call Nadine, then stopped. This had to move fast, without leaving a trail. That night, they packed in silence. Malik drove them out of Atlanta before dawn, taking back roads through the pine-lined hills of Georgia. No phones, no GPS, just a handwritten map and a destination no one else knew: his late mother's cabin. Untouched since she'd passed 5 years earlier, Amara sat in the passenger seat with her sketchbook clutched tight, her hand gripping the leather strap as if it were the only thing tethering her to the present. Fog curled through the trees as they drove deeper into the woods. When they reached the cabin, she stepped inside and took a slow breath. It smells like cedar and loneliness. Malik gave her a faint smile. It's the kind of place that remembers everything. She ran her fingers over the worn windowsill, then turned to him. I'm not afraid of being hunted. I'm afraid of being used. No one will ever use you again, Malik said, his voice steady. Not while I'm still breathing. For 3 days, they stayed completely off the grid. Malik coordinated with Nadine through encrypted messages while Amara painted in silence. But the tension hung heavy, like a weight in the corners of every room. On the 4th morning, Amara found Malik outside, chopping firewood with a quiet, controlled fury. She stood on the porch watching him. Do you think we're safe here? Safer than anywhere else for now, he replied. She nodded, then said something he didn't expect. If they find us, I won't run, not this time. Malik looked at her carefully. Her eyes were clear, her stance steady. There's a strength in you they never managed to break. They broke plenty, she said softly. Just not the part that matters. That night, she woke him with a whisper. Someone's outside. Malik was up instantly, grabbing the pistol from the nightstand. He moved to the window, spotting a dark shape standing just beyond the tree line, too still for an animal, too bold for a lost hiker. They sent someone. Amara murmured. Malik handed her the backup pistol. Don't hesitate. She didn't. They waited in tense silence for hours, Eventually, the shape melted back into the forest, but the message was clear they'd been found. The next morning, Nadine's encrypted message arrived. Your names were flagged. Someone inside law enforcement leaked the witness list. Reed knows. Amara read the words and whispered, "Then let's stop hiding." "I'm ready. Are you sure?" Malik asked. "Once we go back, this won't end quietly." "Nothing about my life has been quiet," she replied. "Let's end it loudly." Malik reached for her hand. "Then we burn it down together." That night, they left the cabin with the headlights off for most of the drive. By the time they reached the outskirts of Atlanta, the storm was already waiting for them, but this time, they weren't running from it. They were walking straight into its eye. They returned to Atlanta under the cover of night, slipping into Malik's penthouse through the private garage to avoid cameras and unwanted eyes. The silence inside wasn't from fear anymore, it was the stillness before a decisive move. Every step from here on would be permanent. Amara set her sketchbook on the kitchen counter, then looked at him. "I want to speak. Not as a victim. Not behind a screen. As myself." Malik searched her face for hesitation, but found none. He nodded. "Then we'll find a way to make them." "Listen." Over the next 2 days, they prepared. Nadine arranged for a confidential interview with a journalist known for exposing corruption inside law enforcement. Amara's voice and evidence would be recorded, but her face would remain hidden. Now, everything they collected would be secured and made permanent. The night before the interview, Amara couldn't sleep. She stood on the balcony wrapped in one of Malik's shirts, staring out over the glittering Atlanta skyline. Malik stepped quietly beside her. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. "You ever wonder who you'd be if no one had ever hurt you?" "All the time," Malik replied. "Do you regret becoming this version of yourself?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "Not anymore." She turned to him, really looking. "Don't want to be saved, Malik. I know. I don't want to be your charity, your redemption, your purpose." "You're not?" "I want to be seen fully, even the damaged parts, especially those. I want you to kiss me, not because you feel sorry for me, but because you see me and want me anyway." Malik didn't speak. He stepped forward and kissed her, slow and certain. There was no pity in it, no urgency to fix or possess, only recognition. Only choice. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his chest. "I didn't think I could ever want again." "There's no finish line here," he murmured. She smiled faintly against him, and for the first time since they met, her breathing came without the weight of memory pressing on it. The next day, the interview took place in a secure location. Amara's voice was steady as she told her story, the branding, the barcode, the years of silence, and the man who had facilitated it all, Marcus Reed. Nadine took the recordings and evidence and passed them directly to a federal task force. Within 48 hours, whispers turned into headlines. Malik and Amara watched it unfold from the safety of the penthouse, neither speaking as Reed's face appeared on national news. The words "alleged cover-up in detention center" flashing below. That evening, Amara found Malik in the sunroom, gazing out at the dusk. She sat beside him and opened her sketchbook to a new drawing, a woman standing at a microphone, shadowed but tall, her mouth open mid-speech, her eyes wide, not with fear but with conviction. "This is who I want to be now," she said. Malik looked at her. "She's already here." In the days that followed, the city felt different, or maybe it was just how Amara saw it now. Headlines ran across every major outlet. Some stories were sympathetic, others skeptical, but they all repeated the same names, the same patterns, the same corruption that had thrived beneath polished badges. Amara watched quietly as more survivors came forward. Some were women, others men, all carrying scars like hers. Each testimony chipped away at the shadows that had once buried the truth. Marcus Reed denied everything at first, calling the allegations political attacks manufactured by radicals. But then the photo leaked, not the one Amara had found, taped to the gate, but another, pulled from a private server. It showed her, at 16, the barcode on her thigh freshly burned into her skin. The mark was undeniable. The internet erupted. Reed's campaign collapsed overnight. He was placed on administrative leave, and a federal warrant followed soon after. Yet none of it brought Amara the peace she thought it would. Speaking had been powerful, but something inside her still felt unfinished. It was like a door had been opened halfway, the most important step still waiting. One morning, she stood at the window watching fog roll over the hills. "I want to testify," she said. Malik set his coffee down. The interview was enough to take him down. That was the goal, to expose him. "I don't just want exposure," she said steadily. "I want confrontation. I want to look him in the eye when I say my name." Malik studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Then I'll be right there with you." Nadine arranged for Amara to be part of the federal hearing. As a protected witness, she had the right to testify behind a screen, her identity shielded, but she refused. "I've been hiding long enough," she told them. "I won't do it in the name of safety now." On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was silent when Amara walked in. Malik was already seated in the gallery, his eyes never leaving her. She wore a plain black dress with long sleeves and a high neckline or makeup. No jewelry, just herself and her name. When the judge called her forward, she stood without hesitation. "State your name for the record, Amara Johnson." The courtroom murmured. She took her seat, adjusted the microphone, and began. She told them everything: the day she was taken, the van, the facility. The man who told her name didn't matter. She described the fire, the mark, and the years she spent carrying it. Then, slowly and deliberately, she rolled up her hem until the scar was visible to everyone in the room. Her voice didn't shake. Her eyes didn't waver. When the defense attorney tried to undermine her, she met his gaze and said, "I'm not here to be believed. I'm here to be recorded. Truth doesn't need permission to exist." The courtroom fell into complete silence. When she stepped down, Malik was waiting just outside the double doors. She walked straight into his arms. "I said it," she whispered, "and I heard you," he replied. And so did they. That night, when they returned home, Amara found her sketchbook on the living room floor. Filled with notes, she hadn't written letters from other survivors, some signed, others anonymous. Every page said the same thing: "Thank you for going." First, she sat on the floor and cried, not from grief, but from the strange weight of finally being seen. Malik sat beside her, holding her hand. "You changed everything," he said. She shook her head, looking at him through her tears. "No. We did." A month later, Marcus Reed was indicted on multiple counts: human trafficking, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. His arrest pulled other names into the light. Mid-level officials, private contractors, silent partners who had signed papers without asking questions. People who had looked away while lives like Amara's were processed, branded, erased. The network that once seemed untouchable was starting to splinter. But for Amara, justice didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like small things: quiet mornings when she could open the blinds without her chest tightening. Walks through the city without her heart racing every time she saw a uniform. It felt like choosing how to spend her time without wondering how someone else would use it. One morning, Malik found her in the sunroom, standing over a blank canvas. "What are you going to paint next?" he asked. She ran her fingers along the edge of the frame. "Something that doesn't start with pain." That afternoon, she visited the community center where she had first met Nadine. She offered to volunteer, and within a week, she was teaching art classes for immigrant women, some newly arrived, others long settled but still too afraid to speak. She shared her story in pieces, always from a place of strength, never more. Then she could give. "I'm not just a survivor," she told them once. "I'm a witness. A survivor escapes. A witness remembers." Malik visited the center one evening and watched from the back as she guided a young girl through painting her first landscape. Amara didn't know he was there. She was laughing, her voice light and unguarded in a way he hadn't heard before. That night, he gave her a simple pendant necklace engraved with her full name, Amara Johnson. She stared at it for a long moment before placing it around her neck. "It's the first time I've worn my name," she said. "You should never have had to hide it," Malik replied, "and now I don't have to." Later, as they lay in bed, she spoke into the dark. "If I hadn't fallen that day in the bathroom, if you hadn't lifted my dress, I would have found out eventually," Malik said softly. "You were never invisible to me." She was quiet for a while, then asked, "Do you still see it?" "The scar?" "Yes," he answered honestly, "but not like you think. It's not what defines you, but it's part of what made you. It reminds me you lived." "I'm starting to believe that too," she murmured. In the days that followed, Malik continued working with Nadine and other advocates to push for reforms in private detention oversight. He never spoke for Amara, he didn't need to. Her voice carried louder than his ever could. One afternoon, she placed a finished painting in his office. It showed a woman walking across a bridge at dawn, fog behind her and light ahead. At the bottom, she had written just 2 words, "Not property," looked at her and said quietly, "You've come all the way through." She shook her head. "No, I'm just beginning." Spring came quietly, slipping in through open windows and warm lights spilling across the hardwood floors. Amara spent mornings barefoot in the garden, tending to the row of lavender she had planted. Herself, the scent rose around her, sweet and grounding, like a reminder that life could grow from broken places. Malik often watched her from the porch, coffee in hand. Content in the stillness they had built together. They didn't talk much. In the mornings anymore, they didn't need to. Some connections spoke better in silence. One afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail addressed to Amara. Malik watched her hands tremble as she opened it. Her eyes scanning quickly before slowing, her breath catching. She looked up at him, stunned. "They approved my residency," she whispered. Her voice cracked on the last word. Malik took the letter gently from her hands and read it himself, making sure it was real. Permanent residency granted under special survivor provisions. Her name was printed clearly at the top. Number, aliases, no numbers, no codes. Trust. Amara Johnson. She laughed through her tears as he pulled her into his arms. "You're free," he whispered. Finally, she breathed against him. That evening, they sat on the balcony watching the city turn gold in the sunset. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we never met?" she asked. "All the time," Malik said. "And I would have kept building walls, buried myself in work. Let the world pass by without ever touching it." She smiled faintly. "And I probably would have kept folding sheets and scrubbing kitchens. Trying not to be seen, staying small enough to survive." He reached for her hand. "And now I want to take up space. I want to be loud when I laugh. I want to walk into rooms with my head high." "Then do it every single day," Malik told her. The weeks that followed were filled with small joys: cooking together, painting late into the night, sitting under blankets during spring thunderstorms. Malik started taking weekends off for the first time in years. Amara taught full-time at the community center. Their home was filled with art, warmth, and quiet promises. One morning, Malik led her to a small hill at the edge of their property. A wooden stake marked the spot, holding a simple sign. "Future site of Johnson House, a safe space for survivors of trafficking." She stared at it, blinking. "You did this?" "No," he said softly. "We did." Her voice shook. "I never thought I'd be part of building something." "You're not just part of it," he told her. "You are it." That night, they lay in bed with the windows open. The sound of crickets drifting in from outside. "I still carry it," she whispered. "The fear. The nights I flinch at shadows. The guilt when I feel happy, then we'll carry it together." Malik said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I'm not property. I'm not silence. I'm not broken." He pulled her closer. "No. You're everything they tried to destroy and couldn't. You're the fire that refused to go out." In that home, in that life they had chosen together, Amara was no longer just a story of survival. She was a story of reclamation. And Malik, the man who once only understood control and strategy, had learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay. Stay when it gets hard. Stay when it gets quiet. Stay when all you can offer is presence. And sometimes, that was more than enough. Months passed, and the ground where the sign had been staked transformed into a foundation. Walls began to rise, each one built with purpose. Johnson House wasn't just going to be a shelter, it would be a place where survivors could learn, create, and breathe without fear of being watched or hunted. Amara spent afternoons walking the construction site, her fingers brushing over the unfinished walls, already imagining the lives that would pass through them. She still carried the weight of her past, but now it felt different. The memories no longer lived in the dark. They had a place in the light. Some days she would stand alone in the garden, lavender in full bloom, and let herself just exist. One summer evening, Malik found her painting on the back patio. The canvas showed a woman standing on a shore at sunrise, the waves calm, her face turned toward the light. Amara didn't look up as he approached. "Who is she?" he asked. "The woman I became," she said softly. He stood behind her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "I see her." Construction on Johnson House finished in the fall. The opening ceremony was small, no media, just a circle of people who understood the weight of what it meant to be safe. Amara gave a short speech, her voice steady, her words simple. "This is not just a building. This is proof we are more than what was done to us." In the months that followed, she poured herself into the work. She led art therapy classes, helped coordinate job training programs, and made sure every person who walked through those doors felt like they belonged to themselves again. Home. Life was quiet in the best way. There were no more rushed conversations, no more unspoken fears crowding the air. They still had their shadows, but they had learned to live alongside them. One night, lying in bed with the windows open to the sound of rain, Amara turned to Malik. "If you had to describe me now, what would you say?" He thought for a moment. "I'd say you're a woman who came back from the fire without letting it take your light." Her smile was slow and genuine. "And you're the man who stayed long enough for me to see it." As the rain tapped against the glass, they lay in comfortable silence. In the dim glow of the room, Amara knew she had arrived at a place she never thought she'd seen at the end of her story, but the beginning of a life she chose. She was no longer defined by a scar, a code, or the cruelty that had once marked her. She was defined by her laughter, her work, the home she had built with her own hands, and the people she would continue to stand beside. And in that moment, with Malik's steady presence beside her, she knew that survival had never been the finish line. This living without apology, taking up space, speaking without fear, this was the victory.